Hello and welcome to Spring into Java. I am your host, Glabe, and today's video is just to pick up where the last video left off because it was getting quite long. It was a little over an hour in total, so I decided to split it up into two parts. So in this part, we're going to actually dive into creating a controller and making some actual endpoint URLs that we can get to. From there, we're going to then fill out our HTTP request models that we've made so that we are pointing them in the right direction. Uh, this is a video just again following up with the last one that we had just done. So fill up that cup of coffee. Let's dive right on in. So to create a controller, we are going to go back into our network, make a new package, and this one is going to be controllers. Well, yes, we'll call this controllers. And inside of here, we're going to make a new Java class. This one is going to be the registration controller, or the user registration controller. So, user registration controller. And in here, there's a couple of things that we're going to do to set up. We're going to use that required args constructor from Lombok again. But now we need to tell Spring that this is a controller. There is a simple annotation to do this, to tell that it is a controller. Now, this is going to expose some RESTful aspects to which there's an annotation that will tell Spring to treat this with the applicable treatments, or the applicable care for RESTful applications. Next thing here is we want to make a request mapping. Now, this is, for all intents purposes, the URL or the address, the base address or base URL that users would use to come to this controller. Now, for us, when Spring itself comes with an embedded Tomcat server, and so by default, it runs on port 8080. So essentially, if you wanted to go to your Spring Boot application, you would just go into your browser and type in http://localhost:8080 and hit enter to come up to your base or your home page. So essentially, anything that we address here as the request mapping would essentially be anything after that domain.top level domain. So whether it be something like runiverse.dev or localhost:8080. In our case, we're going to go /API, and this API is going to be version 1 of our API and is part of the registry. So we're going to go ahead and call this registry. And next, we're going to need to make a way to access our registration service that we had just created. So once again, because we have the required args constructor, we're going to make a private final user registration service. And Spring will go ahead and auto wire that in so that we can take advantage of that. So now, how do we make it so that we can access or make a request to check to see if an account exists or if there's already something registered here? Well, let's go ahead and create a response entity that is going to be that of a Boolean type, so that it is going to simply respond through an HTTP response with the body of whether something is true or false. So public response, spell it right, response entity, and this is going to be of type Boolean. And what we're looking to essentially check is whether or not a user exists. So check if user exists. And now, whenever somebody goes to a specific mapping, or because we're going to need to make an annotation on here to tell Spring what this method is, and this method is simply going to be requesting or handling just post requests. So here we want to tell this that we want to make a new post mapping. Now what this is we're going to finish off that top URL, and this is going to be /register. Registered. There we go. So now, basically what this just opens up is this is an endpoint. This is exposing localhost :8080 / API / v1 / registry / requested to accept post methods. And now we want to, here is where you can do many things. You can either make a request that your HTTP request, you can make a request header annotation, which will state that you want the incoming request to have specific headers in that HTTP request. This is generally good for security reasons as well as a few other types of access. You can specify that the path variable may have to have specific or required specific variables. You can, for this purpose, we're going to make a request that the body has some content, and we're going to request that the body be the registered user DTO form. So we're going to annotate this with an @request body, and we want to tell it that the body that we're looking to request is a registration form DTO. And that is going to be the body of our request, so I'm just going to simply name that body. So we're going to need to make some checks here. The first check that we're going to make is that the object is not null, because if the requested body is null, then we want to return false, as well as we want to return an HTTP status. This is going to help us further later on understand that the object, whether or not it is, why it doesn't exist, for example. Maybe it doesn't think this is obviously not going to exist if there is no content provided. So if objects dot not is null, and that is the body, then we're going to return a new response entity Boolean false, and we're going to tack on the HTTP response. HTTP status that there was no content. No content. That means then we're just going to use that ourselves as a reference of if there was no content provided. So going forward, we're going to assume that there is a body. So what we're going to need to do here is make a check to our user registration service to see if it's available, to check to see if the user is registered. So if, and here we'll use our user registration dot profile exists, and we'll pass in the body. So now if it exists, we want to return new response entity of a Boolean dot true. And that is going to be created as if there is one. So that will be an HTTP status of created. Because otherwise, else it clearly doesn't exist, we would return a new response entity. But false, the user does not exist. Which in our case is going to be HTTP status of OK. So just to double check on that, our registration network is looking to see whether it is created or whether everything is OK. So if the user exists, it is now going to take in a DDO. It is going to be looking to pass that off to our controller, which is located at our endpoint. And it is going to simply take that registered DTO, a registration DTO, check to see if the body's first off null, then it's not there. If the profile exists, then it has been created. And if it's not created, then it's going to return back an OK, which in our case is going to let us know that. Let's just see if I got that right. 1 second. Okay, so just to correct this, I have this now so that if the object was created, or is created within our universe, we're going to say true, the user exists. If there is a conflict, then false, it does not. Yeah, so if there is conflict with controller. So the conflict here, so if the registration service profile exists within our table, then we're going to say true. It's been created. Otherwise, false, there was conflict. There's no account. So now checking to see if the user exists. Yes. If it comes back with a created status, we know that the profile exists within our database. If it comes back with a conflict, then we know that no, there's no database, there's no user in our database. So no, their user does not exist. We are safe to move forward. So now, going forward from here, we are going to create the endpoint for creating an account. So back over in our user registration controller, we are going to be making generally another post request just like this one, except this time we're going to create this to the endpoint of create, I guess. And we're going to call this create new account. So this here is going to return a string this time, just simply so that we can return whether or not something was right or wrong. Give it a little more description to ourselves here. So in this part here, I'm going to go ahead and say that I want this one's here, if there's no body, to just simply return no content, but I want to be able to say there was nothing provided. And of course, if the profile exists, we'll make that redundant check again here, just to make sure. Then in here, we are going to return that this user seems to already exist. And maybe we'll change this one here to an already reported. Just to be a little clearer to ourselves. Now we're going to look at so now from here on out, we now know that the profile doesn't exist, everything has been null, so we're going to look into our user registration service to create and save our new entry, which is just simply our body. Now, once we're done that, we are going to return a new response entity that successfully created and saved a new record. And this will be a HTTP status. I believe we were going to return created on that one. Let's just double check. So we are returning created, and technically we're actually just going to call else on this, because unless it was created, unless the status comes back created, we are basically something went wrong. So successfully created. There we go. Alright, so now we have a way to create an account, we have a way to check if a user exists. All that's left to do now is fill out the mappings here. So to make things easy, because the base URL that we've created is not going to change, we can just simply come into our parent directory or parent interface and make a string here. And this one here could be, say, the base API endpoint. And this is going to be equal to the address that we more or less created. So again, Spring uses port 88 by default, so we can go ahead and make an http://local host 8080. And again, this is going to be our base API, so it's going to be /API. And that is going to be it for the endpoint. Next, we're going to go back to our registration network, and we're going to say that this is going to be the base endpoint. And from there, we are actually going to concatenate the remainder of the of the API that we're looking to access. So that would be version 1 and registry. And this one here was to check to see if the user existed. So in our controller, this was to check if they were registered. So /register, and then we are tacking on the body to that request. Now we are basically using the same thing down here, except we have the endpoint of create instead of registered. So that's how simple it is to make yourself an endpoint, create a data model, and mapping it to a database. In the next video, we will wrap this all together. We will test it out in play, and I'll explain to you a little bit more about what it is that we just did. I'll show you how you can access the data that you want to see after we've registered. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch my series thus far. If you're finding it helpful, please drop us a like. If you happen to find this encouraging and you're looking to continue watching to see where we go, then hit that subscribe button so that you can stay updated to the latest videos. And if you want to watch them right away, you can hit that subscribe or that notification bell to get notified when they go live. Thank you very much for your time once again. I am Glad, and we'll see you in the next video.